change the oil, check the treads, make sure that everything was lubricated, put them back on, and just await an occasion quite like this. We'll be back with more after this.
From NBC News, America at War continues. Here is Tom Brokaw.
We're back now, and I'm Tom Brokaw. We are awaiting an update from the Pentagon and the possibility of a radio or television address by Saddam Hussein, whose country has been under attack now for some 6 hours altogether. It began at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Wednesday. In the Persian Gulf, it was in the middle of the night. In Iraq, military targets were hit in and around Baghdad and in other parts of that country. Also, military targets came under attack in Kuwait, we are told. So far, all the early reports indicate that it has been going very well for the United States and allied forces, but we have to await a further evaluation of that. Early reports from Baghdad indicated that command and control centers were especially hard hit. Radar was taken out. They would control some of the Iraqi missiles. We do not believe that any of the Scud missiles got up. That was the weapon that was feared most of all. The Iraqi Air Force may have been destroyed, but we still cannot say for sure if that's the case. Some of those planes could be in bunkers. Israel, which had worried that it would come under attack as soon as the first shot was fired at Iraq, is breathing somewhat easier tonight. How the rest of the Arab world will react to all of this, we cannot say, because this war still goes on. Even though ground forces have not yet been engaged, they could be before too long. NBC's Fred Francis at the Pentagon. Fred?
Tom, I do not think, based on everything that we have learned at the Pentagon today and in the preceding weeks, that Phase 2, which is the ground war, is near to us. Everything we have learned is that for 3 to 10 days, the United States plans to pound, and that's the word that's used in this building, pound targets, strategic targets, chemical, biological, nuclear targets, tanks, artillery, just pound the Iraqi military for 3 to 10 days. The plan is that they will, at the end of that period, make the determination whether U.S. ground forces will have to go into Kuwait to root out the 500,000 troops that are there. And so that's Phase 2. And based on everything we've been able to learn, Phase 2 is still 10 days off. Tom?
NBC's Fred Francis of the Pentagon. We've been checking in with you all night long, and we will continue to do that. We'd like to go to Ed Rabel now, who is in London, where there has been an emergency meeting of NATO tonight, and Ed is there with Paul Beaver, who represents Jane's Defense Weekly. For the cognoscenti, there is no better publication in terms of knowing what's available to forces around the world and how they may be used. Ed, before we get to Mr. Beaver, give us an update on what the American ambassador said to the other NATO foreign ministers.
Yes, Tom, some interesting messages coming out of that Brussels meeting tonight. There seems to be a willingness now by the United States to end hostilities toward Iraq. Tonight, U.S. Ambassador to NATO William Taft told the 16-nation alliance the goal of the overnight air raids, quote, was not to occupy or dismember Iraq, but to liberate Kuwait, a statement from the U.S. mission at NATO tonight. And then there was also a report out of Brussels that NATO has unanimously agreed to defend Turkey in case that country is attacked. We do have Paul Beaver here, and we want to talk to him tonight about the amazing strikes on Iraq. Were they the success of those strikes? Did they surprise you?
Yes, I think everybody must have been surprised by the fact that at least the first waves of strike aircraft from the US Air Force, the United Kingdom Royal Air Force, the Royal Saudis, and the Free Kuwaitis, all the aircraft seem to have got back without any casualties at all. And I think that's quite an incredible feat.
Well, why do you suppose this happened? I mean, to say Saddam Hussein's Air Force did have some fighters that could fly and fight at nighttime. That is a formidable army he has put together over the past 10 years. What happened?
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? You would have thought that so close to the United Nations deadline that his air defences would be at their highest state of alert. it doesn't appear that was the case, and we don't have any firm details of that. I think it perhaps shows that for some reason the command and control system wasn't functioning for whatever reason, and certainly there's no indication of any air defense fighters being launched by the Iraqis in trying to save or trying to defend Baghdad and other targets. It's not just Baghdad, of course. The targets. It includes missile sites in the west of Iraq, and of course we understand down in Kuwait as well.
Any sense of the expertise that you might have on the question of how reliable Saddam Hussein's officers in the command and control structure might have been, or whether it was United States strikes that took out the command and control structure? Any sense of that?
Yes, I think certainly from what Secretary Cheney has said, what General Powell has said, and also, of course, President Bush, if you put all of their statements together and the official statements that are coming out of the Pentagon, it does seem that the initial targets for the coalition, for air forces, were the command and control centers, the telecommunication centers, the air defense systems. And so I suppose really following standard doctrine these days, these are usually the targets that people go for. So it could well be that they were totally disorientated by the strike. I think it just is a remarkable feat. It shows just how professional modern air forces are or can be if they've got the proper training.
What was the expectation in terms of the losses that the United States and the Allied forces might have had in the air out there in the Gulf tonight?
I think certainly in terms of first strike, there were expected to be casualties. We don't know, of course, exactly what the situation is with further strikes. We understand that for the first 4 hours there were continuous aerial bombardments and manned aircraft strikes. We don't know if all of those aircraft have returned safely. We just hope that they have.
Well, if Iraq decides to continue and not to pull out of Kuwait, what is the next phase in the air war?
Oh, I think we're going to see continued operations. Certainly from what President Bush has said this evening and what the Pentagon has been telling us, that this is not just a flash in the pan from their point of view. They are actually prepared to have continuous operations, and after all there are 1,200 or so strike aircraft and combat aircraft available to the coalition forces, so they could maintain around-the-clock aerial bombardment.
Tom?
Ed Rabel tonight with Paul Beaver, who is with Jane's Defense Weekly, and as you can tell, these are the people who have continuing expertise about capacity and what can be done there. In this country we can only guess has been riveted by what has been going on in the Persian Gulf as we have waited collectively for the countdown to what turned out to be a war after all, a war called Operation Desert Storm. NBC's Keith Morrison tonight has been taking a look at how America has been watching and listening and waiting and praying.
Tom, we certainly, Tom, expected something might happen, but yet when it happened today, a lot of people didn't quite know what to think. It hit them in the stomach. There was that kind of reaction that comes when great or terrible events occur. We sat very quietly and looked at television screens and didn't quite know what to say at the beginning. Here's what we found. Everywhere, though they knew it was coming, was a kind of shock.
Well, actually, I heard it on my car radio, then came on in here and watched it on the news.
People gathered around places where information could be had, any place, trying to comprehend what was happening. First reactions?
It's a tragedy. It's a bad thing that happens, and it's a bad thing, actually. And I feel sad for the whole thing.
Well, there's nothing really we can do right now. I just hope that there aren't that many casualties on our side, and all we can do is just watch the news right now. Just pray.
At a military base east of Los Angeles, troops preparing for service in the Gulf heard the radio, listened, silent.
Action around Baghdad. Apparently there's anti-aircraft fire going on.
And then this from an officer.
I'm sorry it happened, because there's going to be a lot of innocent people die because of one man.
From an enlisted man.
Well, it was one of my worst fears, but it's come true, and now we have to face it.
In San Francisco, opponents of the war heard the news and were furious. And even as they began to march, a screaming headline hit the streets. And by nightfall, downtown San Francisco rang with the shouts of demonstrators saying this is wrong.
We say no! I think we should pull the troops out now. I think this is the biggest mistake Bush has made.
In Albuquerque, Rosemary Brackett, with a son in the Gulf, spoke from the other side of a wide spectrum.
Oh, I think they should be supported 1,000,000%. And those protesters just drove me. I was so angry with those protesters.
In Los Angeles, Al and Norma Jacobs, whose son is now at war, spoke sadly about a conflict they publicly opposed and now hope will end quickly.
I don't really think the peace demonstrations hurt him. I was for a peaceful solution to the war. But since the war started, there's nothing I can do but support the effort right now.
This day has been hardest, of course, for the families, for mothers whose very human feelings are now in such a crisis.
Moms are here to try to help and make things better. This mom can't make this any better. And that's the hardest thing. I feel bad that I can't help him.
And this was the first day, first hours, during which nerves and stomachs were rolling for many. They took what comfort they could.
That last was a picture from an all-night prayer vigil which is being held in Pasadena. We sent our cameras out throughout the western United States, but there was reaction obviously all across the country. We have all been riveted by what has gone on. And we have still disagreed, even after the decision by President Bush, after the announcement that war had begun. There was a clash between anti-war and pro-administration demonstrators in Washington. There were demonstrations in Los Angeles, demonstrations around the campus of UCLA, and reports that tomorrow UCLA students will go on strike. So the anti-war feeling has not disappeared, and yet as the day progressed, Tom, you could see that public opinion about what had happened was changing rapidly. Continues to change rapidly, one gets the impression, again, as we get reports back from our crews. But where it's going to go tomorrow, I guess heaven only knows. We'll just have to watch.
Keith Morrison, thank you very much. That is reflective, I'm sure, of the feelings in the country, a wide range of emotions, everything from people saying this is something that we must do, to people reacting with shock and horror. But now the operation does continue. Before too long, we should be getting some intelligence assessments, I would think. They'll be able to get some satellite photographs out from there. They'll be able to make some visual, I would think, inspections as well of what is going on in those areas where there were some crucial military sites that were attacked. Command and Control Center, CNC, we've been using that phrase again and again. That's generally a bunker. It's generally where the people who run the Iraqi military operations would be located with all of their electronic gear. They want to shut that down so there is confusion in the field. So those forces that are out there won't know what to do, A, and B, won't know whether they have been cut off from the rest of the world altogether. In Saudi Arabia, NBC's Arthur Kent and Mike Betcher standing side by side now with an update on the situation there. Arthur, let's begin with you.
Tom, in the last hour, we've seen about 18, perhaps 20 U.S. F-15 interceptors take off from here, and also a flight of 12 Kuwaiti aircraft, A-4 Skyhawks, the aircraft that managed to get away when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. The Kuwaiti aircraft can't fly at night. This may, in fact, be their first sortie. They were bearing long-range tanks under the aircraft belly, and they took off in the direction of their homeland, Kuwait, and Iraqi forces there. Mike?
Art, ever since the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, and since the first day of the planning for Operation Desert Shield, which has become Operation Desert Storm, everyone wondered how Iraq would react if there was an attack.
Saudi Arabia braced for a counterattack. Across the kingdom, air raid sirens warned civilians and soldiers to take cover. Scud missiles had been detected in the air and heading towards Saudi Arabia. There was a rush to the bomb shelters. Refuge was sought in basements. Protection would be provided by chemical suits. People in Saudi Arabia had been warned that in the event of an attack against Iraq, Saddam Hussein would probably retaliate with chemical weapons. The warning was taken seriously. American soldiers took cover too. All the time, they kept their weapons loaded and ready. After it became clear that no missiles had reached this location in eastern Saudi Arabia, the all-clear was given.
There is no real threat here yet.
A rush of sound and a dot of fire against the moonless night were proof that American and British fighter jets were in the air and conducting combat operations. Early reports indicated that their missions were successful.
All aircraft returned safely. Operations continue.
In the lobby of a hotel near an important American airbase in northeast Saudi Arabia, Muslims faced Mecca and prayed to Allah. One of them was a Kuwaiti refugee who hoped to be returning home soon.
I feel very, very comfortable.
If early reports of the success of the Desert Storm operation are correct, his prayers might indeed be answered. It may be some time before he knows if his prayers are indeed answered, and it will probably be even more time before we know if Iraq has the capability to still launch a counterattack against Saudi Arabia after tonight's action. Tom?
Mike Betcher and Arthur Kent, thanks very much. What are you hearing from the American military officers who have been assigned to you as information officers? Are you getting, in fact, any information from them?
Tom, we're still in the infancy of this operation, and the public affairs officers have been very tight-lipped all night. They've been eager to point us toward Riyadh and toward Washington for information, not too forthcoming with any solid information on the ground here. We are, of course, pressing. Unfortunately, it's an overcast sky today, a bit cloudy, and Mike, we haven't been able to see or count or verify returning aircraft coming back from Kuwait.
And this business of the Defense Department pools and the video that we have seen so far, mostly of fighter planes taking off and some ground troops in a forward position. Have you heard from any of the people assigned to the pool? For example, your colleague Brad Willis, has he checked in at all?
We haven't heard from Brad yet. Gary Matsumoto, another correspondent, was activated sometime last night. We understand he is coming back from an air base, and we should be able to talk to him. Brad Willis, Jeff Riggins, the cameraman, Peter Sampson, the sound man, we have not heard from them for a day, but they're with the Marines. We're sure they're okay, but no word from those pools. All we're seeing are takeoffs and landings and minor things at the present time.
Tom, if I may, Mike, it's striking in that here today, as this major operation is underway, we feel very much in the hands of the U.S. military. Our people, our camera people, sound people, correspondents are taken from us, literally scrambled as the aircraft are, sent to destinations unknown, not of our choosing. Certainly we're interested in reporting fully everything we can, but it's more or less a case of the U.S. military deciding where they will take us and what window on this operation they will provide us.
All right, gentlemen, and tell me about the Saudis. There has been a sizable contingent around the hotel there from the Saudi government, of course. Adil Al-Jabeer, who is from the Prince Bandar staff, and other people there who've been trying to help you. Are you hearing from them now at all?
We heard earlier from them about the fact of the launchings of Scud missiles towards Saudi airspace, and the really only substantial report we've had so far from them was that at that time no Scud missile had reached Saudi airspace. Later on, it seems that Scud missiles did come into Saudi territory. We're still trying to get a complete confirmation on that. But at the present time, not a lot of information coming out on Saudi television at the present time. There are speeches, patriotic music being played, pep talks. Saudi commanders are now speaking to the nation. It was pre-recorded material of them saying that they were winning this war and trying to get the spirit of the nation up. They're trying to reassure the nation. But very little hard information right now, Tom.
Thank you very much, Mike Betcher and Arthur Kent in Saudi Arabia. We have some late pictures, I think, from the Defense Department pool over there. Most of the pictures that we have seen so far have been on the ground and at night. This, again, is another Air Force base, and we do not know. Those appear to be very recent because they're daytime photos. One of the big cargo planes that could be carrying troops or material, as you can see, the desert dunes in the background. I think what we're looking at here, I'm not an expert on this kind of stuff, but I think what we're looking at here are F-16s now. It's a different craft with a single rudder Fred, help me out with that.
That's right. Those were F-16s,
Right.
which were not used in the night assault because most F-16s cannot attack at night, and landing behind the F-16 in the background was an Air Force C-130.
Right.
And here you're looking at ordnance bombs, which will be laced up underneath those bombers, and these look to be. I'm not quite sure what that is. It looks to be like an F-111 or an F-15 there, and get a closer look.
It's too big for an F-15. It's probably an F-111.
That's right. That's an F-111 bomber, and that looks like a 2,000-pound bomb there. And it also has some other missiles laced up underneath the wing here, Tom. And the turnaround time on these things is 15 or 20 minutes, and obviously this was. Don't seem to be any great urgency putting these things on. Most of these, that's a laser-guided smart bomb there. And the way that works, Tom, is that from the belly of the F-111, a laser locks onto the target. And once there's a lock-on to a target on the ground, the bomb is released, and it follows the laser into the target. And if you'll remember that dramatic video of the F-111 bombers dropping their bombs on the airport in Tripoli, Libya, that's how that was done, with the laser locking onto the target and the bomb following it in. And they are reputed to be so accurate that they can hit a target within 15 feet of that laser lock-on. And of course that didn't happen in Libya. There's a great downfall to this type of weapon, Tom, that if there's any dust, serious dust in the air, or serious smoke in the air, or serious bomb debris from the previous bomb, the laser lock-on is broken. And that's how the French embassy was hit in Tripoli with one of those bombs. And again, that appears to be an F-111 getting ready.
Yeah, well, now we've just taken another look at an F-16 out there. We don't know where this airbase is, obviously. These are pictures that have been released by the Defense Department. They've had a very tight rein on American reporters and their ability to move around. In Saudi Arabia, they're releasing just exactly what they wanted to. We have yet to receive anything that looks like the attack taking place, although there was one earlier picture of some F-15s taking off. General William Westmoreland once complained, in his words, that Vietnam was the first war fought without any censorship, and as a result, things got terribly confused in the public mind. That was not lost on this generation of military leaders. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. There's been a real war fought here at the Pentagon in Washington over just what rules would prevail over the coverage of that we're seeing right now. Over the last 2 to 3 weeks, the bureau chiefs of the major news organizations fought the Pentagon down from 6 pages of rules to 1 page, and but never got what they really wanted, the bureau chiefs and the major news organizations, and that was complete unilateral coverage where news organizations could just send their men up to the front lines.
Yeah, it's not entirely a joke out there in Saudi Arabia with the guys who did serve in Vietnam, mostly of officer rank. They say duty, honor, and hate the media. And it was they said it with a tight little smile when they were talking to you about it. And in fairness, 1 or 2 of them had been burned occasionally, but they're there to do a mission, and they don't want the military to get as damaged as it was in Vietnam, in which, in too many instances, and this is understandable from their point of view, they're sensitive to this, the military became a kind of societal pariah. That, too, was unfair.
Yeah, exactly, Tom. Tom, a point about the bomb you're seeing right here and the targets that those bombs may well be used against today. Sources tell NBC News that there is a concern at the Central Command headquarters and here at the Pentagon and the administration that Saddam Hussein has hidden some of his missile systems. And over the last several weeks, U.S. intelligence has some evidence that what Saddam Hussein's very good combat engineers have done is dig deep holes in the earth, holes large enough to drive a trailer truck into, and then have covered up those holes and have hidden mobile Scud missiles in those trenches. And that's what these bombs will go after.
Fred, we've got a late report out of Nicosia, Cyprus again. This is a monitoring radio out of Iraq. Military command from Iraq said Thursday that civilian and military facilities had been hit in the massive U.S.-led airstrikes. The enemy planes only hit the targets that God wanted, whatever that means. So we'll talk about that later. We'll be back with continuing coverage after this.
From Channel 4, this is a Gulf War News Extra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Puckett. President George Bush warned Iraq's Saddam Hussein to pull his forces out of Kuwait or face possible military action. Last night, that signal for military action came as the sound of Allied fighter jets stormed across the skies of Baghdad and turned Operation Desert Shield into Operation Desert Storm. Just before 6 p.m. Central Time, fighter jets from the U.S., Great Britain, and Saudi Arabia began their attack on Baghdad. Sources at the Pentagon say only air units are involved in combat at this time. According to U.S. Defense Secretary Dick Cheney, last night's attack was aimed primarily at destroying Iraqi military targets to avoid civilian injury.
The targets being struck tonight are located throughout Iraq and Kuwait. Our focus is on the destruction of Saddam Hussein's offensive military capabilities, the very capabilities that he used to seize control of Kuwait and that make him a continuing threat to the nations of the Middle East.
In a prepared statement, President George Bush continued his stand on forcing Saddam Hussein to release his death hold on Kuwait.
The United States, together with the United Nations, exhausted every means at our disposal to bring this crisis to a peaceful end. However, Saddam clearly felt that by stalling and threatening and defying the United Nations, he could weaken the forces arrayed against him.
In the Middle East, it's just after 9 in the morning. Military officials say it seems quiet now in Baghdad, with only occasional planes flying overhead. There's no official word on damages so far, although unofficial reports say that primary targets such as the Baghdad airport and some Iraqi military installations were destroyed. The men who represent Tennessee in Congress are all united behind the president. None of them want war, but most seem to feel it needs to be fought. Senator Al Gore Jr. was in Memphis tonight.
Nobody wanted this. It came because Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and represents a threat that will have to be dealt with, in the words of one of those soldiers quoted by the president, sooner or later. And for a variety of reasons, it is wiser to confront that threat now than to confront it later.
Again, Gore made those comments in Memphis, but as soon as the speech was over, he flew back to Washington. There is strong reason to believe that some of the hundreds of Tennessee Guardsmen in the Mideast were involved in tonight's action. According to Tennessee Adjutant General Carl Wallace, it would have been a unit out of Knoxville, the 134th Air Refueling Group. Its mission, obviously, refueling aircraft. General Wallace suspects it aided in the first waves of air attacks on Iraq. Wallace also says other units, including the 130th RAOC out of Smyrna, have been moved up closer to the front line. But it's important to remember that at this point, all the action has been in the air, not on the ground. and the Pentagon has indicated that will likely be the case for some days. That could also mean days before the thousands of men and women from Fort Campbell see action. There, too, it's an uncomfortable time of waiting and worrying. Taking a look at our local weather presently in Nashville, it's 41 degrees and cloudy skies. Winds are out of the west at 8 miles per hour. The barometer is 30.11 and rising, and the relative humidity is 86%. Stay tuned to Channel 4 for continuing coverage of the war in the Middle East. NBC News will continue its 24-hour coverage of the latest developments of Operation Desert Storm, and we'll bring you local updates every half hour throughout the morning. Our next update at 12:55.
From NBC News, America at War continues. Here is Tom Brokaw.
It is called Operation Desert Storm, and it has been underway primarily in the air for now 6.5 hours. It began at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. These are some Defense Department pictures, pool videotape, they're called. DOD stands for Department of Defense, provided for us as the planes are loaded with the armaments. It was primarily an air attack that was launched tonight against military targets in Kuwait and in Iraq. So far as we know, they have been very effective. There has been no counterstrike that we can determine now from Iraq so far. There were earlier reports that some Scud missiles may have been launched, and then an indication that those reports were in fact in error. So far, no signs of any kind of chemical warfare. So no signs of the Iraqi Air Force in the air, and no ground forces moving toward the Saudi border, where there is an enormous grouping of American ground forces aided by Arab allies as well as British forces on the ground as well. As of this hour, American ground forces we do not think have been used, but it is likely that at some point they may have to cross the border. To what extent, we cannot say. It really depends on the success of this air campaign, which is going on. We believe, however, that at the moment there's an assessment underway on the part of the American intelligence defense groups. That would include the CIA and others. They'll want to see how much damage was done. They'll want to see where they want to go next to see if they can't bring Saddam Hussein to his knees. So that's the situation at this hour in Saudi Arabia as we watch those missiles being launched. I think that one is air-to-air, isn't it, Fred?
That's air-to-air, Tom, and you and I would have flunked the plane identification test. The earlier aircraft were F-15s. These are F-15 Eagles, which have a ground attack mode. There are anti-armor cluster bombs being loaded, Sidewinder missiles. I'm not sure what kind of missile this is right here, a standard missile. A longer range air-to-air missile. Obviously, the F-15 Eagle can both attack on the ground and also attack in the air.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing here, Tom, is that these pictures were taken sundown yesterday in somewhere in Saudi Arabia, and that appears to be a good 9 hours before 8 to 9 hours before the attack. So the preparation was going on all day yesterday, getting these aircraft ready to go.
Well, the quick way I can tell the difference is that if they've got twin rudders at the back, then it's probably an F-15, and I didn't see that at the beginning, but we will take any correction those fighter pilots are calling in, and I know that they're calling in.
Believe me, Tom, these phones are real busy here. Every time we make a mistake on the air, we're corrected.
No, I know. There's nothing more sensitive, and I do not, even though I've been up in the back seat of one of them, I do not pretend to be an expert, in part because I think that my heart was in my throat most of the time that I was on the flight.
Tom, let's go back to the terrible business of day 2 of this war. Sources tell NBC News, again, as I said earlier, that they are concerned that Saddam has hidden some of his mobile missiles and hidden them under highways and in deep ditches, and that these mobile missiles may be launched today. So no matter how successful the Pentagon and Secretary Cheney and others in Saudi Arabia say that this mission is, no matter how successful, that day two is on us, and he still has his mobile missiles. You know, nothing ever goes as planned in war. I think one of the adages is that no war plan survives contact with the enemy, and on day 2, although we've gotten a rosy assessment of day 1, day 2 is another story.
All right, Fred Francis at the Pentagon, thanks very much. We have Gary Sick here in New York, and we have in Amman, Jordan at this hour, NBC's Dennis Murphy. Amman is a capital that we have been watching with great care. It's the home to a lot of Palestinians. There were anti-American demonstrations in the street right up to the point of this war being launched. It's caught between Israel and Iraq itself, and a lot of those Palestinians have very fervent feelings about the United States in all of this, and they see Saddam Hussein as a champion. Dennis, anything going on in the streets of Amman?
I was just looking from our perch here in the 15th floor over the city of Amman, Tom, and to me it looks like quite a normal day. A few cars lined up at the gas stations, but it seems to be a normal day, certainly a shocking one for them when they woke up this morning and found that the Iraqi military machine had apparently all but collapsed. Many supporters, as you say, for Saddam Hussein. I can tell you, Tom, that the international airport is closed. There are no planes coming in or out of Amman, Jordan, and the reason is that, encouraging as the news is about the increasing unlikelihood of a confrontation now between Iraq and Israel. That was the great fear here. Always have to talk about geography with Jordan in the middle. The fear less today that there will be that confrontation, but nonetheless the airspace is going to remain closed so they can keep a look on those skies. Tom, let's talk for a minute about the U.S. Dependents over here and those people carrying U.S. passports. Our best guess is that there are about 3,000 Americans who are still in the country. Now, 3 weeks ago, the U.S. Embassy here told those Americans that they suggested in a very strong fashion that they best get out of Amman, Jordan, as long as this crisis was occurring. Now, a few hours before the attack, I talked to some American women. Most of them are wives of Jordanian men. They have children who have American passports. And we talked about the crisis from an American point of view, living inside the culture, about their fears and how they were looking at the crisis. And here's some tape of some of their thoughts.
I don't believe the invasion of Kuwait was right. But I don't believe that our president in America has the right to let young boys be killed. For what?
An American policy is disastrous as far as I'm concerned. They've never had a Middle Eastern policy. They want to appease Israel and they want Arab oil. And they're trying to juggle always between these two opposing forces. You can't make friends of an enemy of the majority of people here and subsidize them and keep them in the Middle East in a very strong position.
That this war will be a war to outlast all other wars.
That was a sentiment that you heard a lot in the last few days, Tom, that this was going to be a huge war, it was going to be another Vietnam, and the United States did not know what it was getting into. Let me just say on the thought of the American dependents, if the streets here do become dangerous, and this is an if, we're looking forward possibly to civil unrest. There are a great many Saddam Hussein supporters in Amman, Jordan, as you pointed out. There's no saying what could happen. Could be nothing. But if there is trouble in the streets, the American embassy here does have some contingency plans to get the Americans out. And I should say there are no plans at this moment to evacuate those Americans. And I know there are a lot of people in the United States who may be watching concerned about friends and family here in Amman. And let me say, it seems to be a normal day. There's no reports of trouble in the street, and here we are going into to 9 o'clock. We should say, though, that coming up, in about an hour, Tom, we have the funeral of those three PLO leaders, two high-ranking aides to Yasser Arafat. That could be a very emotional event coming on this morning of all mornings.
All right, thank you very much. Dennis Murphy in Amman, Jordan tonight. It may be peaceful in Amman, but it is an attack is underway again, we're told, by CNN, which has the only line that it seems to be up and operating out of Baghdad. Bernie Shaw of CNN is reporting that city is once again under attack, that the raids have been resumed. It is now daylight there. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning. There's an hour difference between Jordan and Iraq. Fred Francis at the Pentagon, are you hearing anything about this?
No, Tom, but when we were on the air earlier, we saw or heard aircraft taking off from Dhahran, where Mike Betcher and Arthur Kent are, and that was approximately 20 minutes ago. And that's about the flying time between strike targets in southern Kuwait. So it doesn't surprise me at all. We were told earlier in the evening by sources here at the Pentagon that the sorties flown on day 2 during the day would be much heavier than the first 2 or 3 hours of combat over nighttime Iraq. And I would expect these attacks to continue all day long with the F-15 Strike Eagles and for the first time carrier-based jets, the A-6Es, the carrier bombers, the intruders, would be used. We were told they were not used in the initial attacks, the first 2 or 3 hours at night, but they would be brought to bear here on the second day. What is the way the Pentagon has these ships positioned? There are 2 carriers in the northern Red Sea, 2 carriers in the northern Red Sea, and 2 carriers in the northern Persian Gulf, and in the lower Red Sea another carrier, and in the lower Persian Gulf another carrier. So the plan is for a sustained bombing campaign that goes from 3 to 10 days, and they're holding a carrier in reserve. And of course, on the land-based strike aircraft, using approximately 150 Saudi Arabian planes, approximately 40 to 75 planes from the British, and more than 1,700. That's 1,700 American strike planes, which are based in Saudi Arabia and some of the surrounding countries, like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. And so those attacks will continue, and we expect them to be quite heavy and hit again some of the same targets. And Tom, we have now had time since daylight over there to get some battle damage assessment, and that won't be reported to us here at the Pentagon, but the satellites at first light will look down and immediately transmit the digital pictures of the targets right here, very close to the Pentagon, to a photo assessment, and those pictures will then be transmitted by satellite to the Central Command headquarters in Riyadh, and they will be able to pinpoint exactly what they did in the overnight bombing raids. And I believe, as Admiral Kendall Moranville told us earlier, many of those targets will have to be hit again. And the attacks at night are good attacks when they're surprising attacks, but they will have to be hit again. And the Pentagon has now confirmed, according to NBC correspondent Bob Hager, that the strikes are continuing, but that they're continuing heavy, but they never really stopped, according to the Pentagon. And so we're into day 2 here, and a lot of the same targets that were hit yesterday will be hit again. One of the targets I know that was hit, and our correspondent in Baghdad, Tom Aspel, described it. He said, "I see a large large green flash." Well, I am told that was most probably one of Saddam Hussein's chemical plants, where he made precursor chemicals for poison gas. And that's the kind of flame that goes up when you hit a chemical plant, I'm told. It's that large green light. And so those are the kind of targets they'll go after again today. Tom?
All right, thank you very much, Fred Francis. Gary Sick, who is an authority on the Middle East and on what's going on in the Persian Gulf. What do we know about Saddam Hussein after this first attack? He comes out with all this rhetoric calling the United States the great Satan, saying that he's the protector of the holy sites and so on. What does it tell us about his mindset?
You know, I think there was one key word in that statement that he made in looking back about it, and he said that Iraq, in effect, will win when the will of the great Satan in the White House breaks. And I think it may be a real clue as to what was going on in his mind throughout this. We've all been trying to read his mind, mostly with no success, to try to figure out what was really going on in there. I think the initial statement that he made to April Glaspie, our former ambassador out in Baghdad, just before the attack began, believing that the United States could not take casualties, that the United States basically had no stomach for war, that we wouldn't go through with it. I think he must have believed that right up to the end. It's the only thing one can say that explains what appears to be a sort of abysmal lack of awareness of what was going on around him with 5 months warning.
I must say I was also struck when I talked to the people around him over the weekend that they saw this as a kind of a personal contest. They talked derisively about Bush, and not in a political way, but they said, you know, he went away and now he's so nervous and excited, and they kind of laughed as if they were tougher than he was, and they saw this as a barroom brawl of some kind.
Saddam has always... He has felt that the edge that he had over other leaders is that his nerves were more steely, that he could walk up to the brink and stay there longer than anybody else, that he could outbluff anybody in a game of chicken. And up to a point, you know, he has a point, because he has a country that will do whatever he wants them to do. There's never any argument that comes back at him. He can swerve and maneuver as quickly as he wants to, and he does have nerves of steel. But it seems to me he really began believing his own propaganda as he got close to the end, and in fact was not ready to believe that it would come. And I think he was also judging by 8 years of war with Iran. And he believed, he kept saying over and over, we've been through war. We know what war is. We know what it's all about. And you can't teach us anything about that, and we are experienced. But he had never experienced anything like this, even for a day, throughout that entire period of time. There was nothing that Iran ever did to him in the course of the entire war for 15 minutes. That was the equivalent of what happened to him in the first few minutes.
I guess it's impossible to make this an accurate forecast on your part, but give us your best guess on how successful he will be with this latest inflammatory statement about President Bush and King Fahd of Saudi Arabia, and trying to invoke the idea that he is the true believer and the defender of the Islamic rule.
He has been counting, I think, from the beginning that he was going to have the Arabs behind him. But you know, the Arabs also look at the statistics and the box score. And if they conclude that in fact he is on his way out, certainly there will be demonstrations and so forth. But there will also be a reaction of sort of vultures gathering around this corpse. I think that's premature at this point. But I was struck by one thing that we heard a little earlier this evening from the correspondent in Turkey, who said that they're now ready to vote for a declaration of war and possible cross-border operations. They were never willing to do that before because Turkey felt threatened by Iraq and throughout the entire war remained absolutely neutral. If they're willing to join in at this point, it suggests that the Turks may also have a pretty clear estimate of what this first strike was and think that they have always coveted those northern territories.
Gary Sick, we'll watch now some more video that is coming in from the Defense Department pool. These appear to be tankers that are landing at, well, so much for that. We will tell you tonight, this is probably not unexpected, that in a private meeting with the United Nations Security Council, the United States Ambassador to the UN, Thomas Pickering, said that Iraq could avoid further punishment by beginning a complete unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait. The conditions have not changed. There is now, one would think, for a normal person, a lot more incentive to do just that. There has been no indication from him whatsoever that he is inclined to do it. NBC's Arthur Kent is in Saudi Arabia. Do you have some late stuff for us, Arthur?
Well, Tom, not much hard information yet. We're still awaiting the return of the first videotape from the pools that are at this nearby air base, but we have been hearing all evening talk about counterstrikes by Iraq. Does Saddam have the ability, through his armed forces, to strike back at the U.S. and the anti-Iraq coalition? It's an open question whether he can do that militarily, but certainly here in Saudi Arabia, right around our position, we're noticing that there are some precautions being taken against terrorist attack. We now have, just around our camera position, an armed Navy petty officer with M16 and sidearm. And as of the commencement of this operation, we noticed that soldiers, armed soldiers, and Marines were keeping close eye on the perimeter. We hear they will be doing house cleaning, both here and around all military installations, again with an eye to making sure that if there are terrorist cells in place, in Saudi Arabia at least, to strike back on behalf of Saddam, that they will be tripped up in the process.
All right, Arthur Kent, thanks very much. Of course, on the home front, the people who have been watching this more carefully than anyone else are the wives and the families and the very close friends of those men who are in duty in the Persian Gulf tonight. We have been going to Fort Stewart, Georgia, and we have been talking with the wives of American military servicemen there as well. You may recall last night that I talked with Claire Blanchard and Cindy Roth. They're part of a wives support group. These have been organized at bases all over the country, and at those support groups, what they do is help each other through their fears, their concerns, and their day-to-day practical matters, so that they can feel that they're not isolated in some fashion, because there is a lot of anxiety as well. Also on the West Coast, there is a situation in the Marine Corps. Margaret Larson is out there now, and she's been talking with the families of some of the Marines who have gone to the Persian Gulf. And let's go to Margaret Larson now for this report from Oceanside, California.
is something of an air of relief here at the Comer household, where Tammy Comer, who is the wife of Marine Sergeant Carl Comer, has been glued to the television tonight for information and also to hear the speech of President George Bush earlier. Tammy, what was your reaction?
I fully support everything he said. I just, right now, hoping that it's going to be short and sweet and send our loved ones home, and I'm exhausted.
You're exhausted not only physically but emotionally. The care of 4 children. Your husband's been absent, in fact, before Operation Desert Shield for 2 months and then the 5 months since. What have you had to face during that period of time?
I couldn't begin to tell you. Just seems like when he left, everything fell apart, but we brought it back together. Kids' stitches, cars breaking down, big phone bills, stress at work, stress at home. But we pulled it together, and we're going to continue being strong.
When was the last time you talked to Carl?
I talked to him New Year's Eve.
And he told you?
That he wasn't scared, that he was worried, and I told him, you're not human if you're not scared. And he said, please continue being strong, and I'll be home soon, and wait for me.
Just 3 hours ago, we were all sitting here in a very worried state. You are much more relaxed now. The kids are more relaxed. Do you think this is over, or is there more to come?
I think there's more to come. I don't think it's over. It's too quick.
There's been a lot of togetherness of the families here, 12,000 dependents on Camp Pendleton, and some 30,000 like yourself and your family off the base. How have you managed to cope?
Well, we have a little support group here, as well as I'm a member of a support group for my husband's unit, where we just spend a lot of time together. We talk, we show our emotions together, we do a lot of things with our children, and that's how we do it.
Just get through it day to day.
Just go day to day.
Well, the first wave of Operation Desert Storm is over tonight. Perhaps there's more, we don't know, but the household here at the Comers is much more relaxed and hoping for the best.
Military families go through their own special kind of training as well. We'll want to tell you, and I think that we may have this ready. I don't want to throw our control room a big curve here, but there have been some numbers that you can call. The Defense Department has released 24-hour telephone numbers that Americans with relatives participating in Operation Desert Storm can call, and they can find out then what is going on. Can we work our way through those? Is that okay? Yes. Okay. There's the United States Air Force number. It is 1-800-253-9276. If you have somebody in the Air Force participating in what is now becoming Operation Desert Storm, you can call that number for an update on what is going on. These are some other numbers as well. The United States Army, 1-703-614-0739. Again, general information about someone who is serving in the U.S. Army. The Navy has 2 numbers, immediate family members only, 1-800-255-3808. 1-800-255-3808 for immediate family members. For general information, the same area code, toll-free, and then 732-1206. And the United States Marines, 1-800-523-2694. It goes without saying you should only call if you have a genuine question or if you're a member of the family or you need to know something. Otherwise, those lines will get tied up. And come on, they really belong to the family members. They're the ones who should be able to hear from them. So I'll tell you that at this hour, we're coming up, shortly before 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That means in the Persian Gulf and Iraq itself, it's about 10 in the morning, mid-morning. There have been additional reports of more attacks going on at this time, explosions in and around Baghdad. A brief report from Bernard Shaw of CNN that the attack came and went in a hurry. They probably knocked out most of the military sites around Baghdad in that first wave, the ones that they wanted to get to. There are other places there. A lot of the buildings have anti-aircraft postings on them. These are places where Saddam Hussein may be. It's, for example, the Ba'ath National Headquarters or some of the government compounds where they may be staying, and they are right on the broad boulevards. Gary Sick?
There's another reason for at nighttime, they can minimize casualties in the street, that people are out and away. And I think if you're going to go at a target that's very close to a city, doing it in the middle of the night is a much better time if you want to minimize casualties. And it could be, although we would do it for strategic reasons perhaps, but it offers another reason for it.
Okay, Gary Sick is here with us, and a lot of other people, not just here in New York, but around the world. And we'll have continuing coverage of America at War, Operation Desert Storm, right after this.
From Channel 4, this is a Gulf War News Extra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Puckett. It's just before 10 o'clock in the morning in the Middle East. According to officials, air raids have now resumed in Baghdad, and there have been several reports of more explosions throughout the city. Saddam Hussein has made an appearance on Iraqi TV condemning President Bush for his actions. There's no official word yet on damages so far, although unconfirmed reports say that damage to Baghdad's international airport was severe. Other reports say that several Iraqi military installations were also hit under massive air power. Just before 6 p.m. Central Time last night, fighter jets from the U.S., Great Britain, and Saudi Arabia began their attack on Baghdad. Sources at the Pentagon say only air units were involved in the combat. According to U.S. Defense Secretary Dick Cheney, the attack was aimed primarily at destroying Iraqi military targets to avoid civilian injury.
The targets being struck tonight are located throughout Iraq and Kuwait. Our focus is on the destruction of Saddam Hussein's offensive military capabilities, the very capabilities that he used to seize control of Kuwait and that make him a continuing threat to the nations of the Middle East.
In a prepared statement, President George Bush continued his stand on forcing Saddam Hussein to release his death hold on Kuwait.
The United States, together with the United Nations, exhausted every means at our disposal to bring this crisis to a peaceful end. However, Saddam clearly felt that by stalling and threatening and defying the United Nations, he could weaken the forces arrayed against him.
U.S. officials in Saudi Arabia say that Allied forces are in a flurry of activity this morning in preparation for another possible attack.
American hearts weigh heavy with concern for our troops in the Middle East. We at Channel 4 understand the concerns you and your family might have due to the military action in the Gulf. As a result, Crisis Call will be available 24 hours a day to help provide emotional support and referrals for these trying times. If you need help coping with the crisis in the Gulf, call Crisis Call 244-7444 for the family.
You know, there was a time in my life when it was a struggle reading a book, even my own Bible, all because no one in my family realized the importance of education. Well, I'm here to tell you that education can open your eyes, open your mind, and open doors. So join me this year in supporting Channel 4's effort to make education count. It's something we all can stand up for.
Stand Up for Education, created by WSMV for the family.
Some Tennessee guardsmen may have played a role in last night's initial attack against Iraq. One of the units from Knoxville, the 134th, is an air refueling unit. And Tennessee Guard Adjutant General Carl Wallace suspects it was in use this morning. Other units, including the 130th RAOC, an administrative unit, have moved closer to the front. For General Wallace, as for all of us, it's a difficult time.
And anytime that we have Tennesseans or Americans involved in an operation like this, you just don't let it go by without a great deal of thought. I even said several prayers tonight that those of our own units from Tennessee would be taken care of.
General Wallace has announced plans to retire, but he says he won't step down until the units sent to the Mideast are back home. Tennessee's congressional delegation is rallying around the president this morning. Virtually all our senators and congressmen say they are deeply saddened by going to war, but most seem to feel the die is cast that this was Saddam Hussein's choice. Senator Albert Gore Jr. said Hussein's threat had to be dealt with sooner or later, and that for a variety of reasons, sooner is better than later. Taking a look at our local weather presently in Nashville, it's 41 degrees under cloudy skies. Winds are out of the west at 8 miles per hour. The barometer 30.11 and rising, and the relative humidity 86%. Stay tuned to Channel 4 for continuing coverage of the war in the Middle East. NBC News will continue its 24-hour coverage of the latest developments of Operation Desert Storm. And we'll be bringing you local updates every half hour throughout the morning. Our next update will be at 1:25.
From NBC News, America at War continues. Here is Tom Brokaw.
We continue now with Operation Desert Storm, which is the American attack on Iraq, primarily the American attack, although British air units and Saudi air units joined as well. So far, no word from the Pentagon on casualties. General euphoria on the first reports of the bombing attacks on Iraqi radar installations, missile sites, command and control centers in and around Baghdad itself, and also in the outlying areas. And we think, too, that military targets in Kuwait have been hit, although we cannot say for sure at this time. President Bush addressed the nation at 9 last night, Eastern Standard Time. He said that this was something that had to be done. American ambassadors around the world are now spreading the word that Saddam Hussein still has a chance to stop the damage if he'll just begin a complete and unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait. And Gary Sick is with us now. Gary Sick, you and I were of one last week in believing that this would not happen, and then I fell away.